Okay, so main attraction for this section is this finding the domain. So we want to be able to find the domain of functions. So let's say find the domain of, and let's see here, let's do part A here. Let's do f of x equals the square root of x. Now, in terms of square roots in general, or even powered roots, we could say as well, but in terms of square roots, we are not allowed to plug in negative numbers into a square root. So negative numbers would not be valid input values for a square root. Now, for square roots, we are allowed to plug in positive numbers, and we are allowed to plug in 0. So anytime I encounter a square root and I have to find its domain, I always look at what's inside the square root. In this case, it's the square root of x. And so the x is on the inside. So I know that x has to be greater than or equal to 0 because it can be positive, it can be greater than 0, and it can be 0, it can be equal to 0. It can't be negative, so it can't be less than 0, but it can be greater than or equal to 0. Now in this case, since x was the only thing on the inside of that square root, I'm done. I've figured out the domain. You'll notice on MyMathLab, it's going to be very particular about how as you enter these answers in, it's going to ask you for one of two things. It might ask you for set notation. And set notation looks like this. So let's see here, curly bracket x such that x is greater than or equal to 0. Be how we would answer that with set notation. So that vertical bar there means such that. But more likely, it's going to ask you for interval notation. And interval notation, the way that works is it wants an interval, kind of like what you'd see on a number line. And if a number line helps you with writing these answers out, by all means use one. We figured out that the domain was x is greater than or equal to 0. So let's go ahead and put that on a number line. And so that means our interval here, our interval for our answer for our domain, well, it starts at 0. It's including 0, so I'll use a bracket. And it's going all the way to the right, so all the way to positive infinity there. So either one of those answers is correct. It just depends on what form of the answer you're being asked to write it in when you type it into your homework or into a quiz or one day into a test. So either set notation or interval notation is correct there. And let's see here, let's do another example with a square root involved. So actually I'll go ahead and box this whole thing. So either one of those answers is correct up above there. Let's do f of x is equal to the square root of x plus 5. So the square root of x plus 5, now similar to the last one, we have a square root. So we know we can plug in positive numbers, we know we can plug in 0. In this case, the thing on the inside of the square root is x plus 5. So that is what needs to be greater than or equal to 0. In order to solve for x, we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. And you can start writing your answers now. If you want to draw a number line to help you write your answers, that's fine too. In this case, we need a -5 on that number line. It's equal to and greater than, so to the right and with a closed circle. So the set notation answer here would be x such that x is greater than or equal to -5. And the interval notation here would be bracket -5 to positive infinity. And I'll do a few more with square roots here. So let's say part C, f of x is equal to the square root of -2x plus 7. So the thing on this inside of the square root is a -2x plus 7. I know that needs to be greater than or equal to 0. I am going to subtract 7 from both sides. That will give me a -7 on the right-hand side. I'm going to divide both sides by -2. When I do that, I am dividing an inequality by a negative, so I do need to flip that and make it less than or equal to. And okay, so if I need a number line, I can go ahead and set that up. This time it flipped to a less than, so that's going to the left there. So set notation x such that x is less than or equal to 7/2. Interval notation, negative infinity this time, all the way up to positive 7/2. It's a closed circle, so we're going to have a bracket there. Go ahead and circle these two answers here. And do one last one with the square roots, or at least for now, one last one with square roots. Let's do f of x is equal to the square root of -x minus 1. So on the inside of the square root is a -x minus 1. That needs to be greater than or equal to 0. And let's see here, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. I also need to divide by -1. I'm dividing by negative, so I need to flip that sign. Positive 1 divided by -1 is -1. You don't have to draw the number line, but if it's helpful to you, please draw it. It's worth the extra couple seconds. In this case, set notation is usually the nice one. You just take your work there, that final line, x is less than or equal to -1, just put it in set notation format. Interval notation, I think the number line really helps there, but you certainly don't need the number line if it's not useful to you.